I decided to come to you with my little comic book collection. I have all my books spread out here, and I actually kind of came up with this idea for this video because yesterday I picked up a few more comics and I ran into a bunch of young kids, and it was really cool to be able to know like this much about comics, to be able to tell this little girl like what she might like, because she was looking at two, which were Gem and the Holograms, and I think it's the Zodiac Warriors is the other one. So it's really cool to see like the next generation still getting into comics, and really for me just getting into comics now for the first time. So yeah, I'll go ahead and get started. So I kind of have them broken up into a weird categorical system, but it makes sense for me. So the first group that I'll go through are actually comics that I used to read online, like they used to be web comics, but now also have printed versions or printed stories. And this is fairly common. I know you can see if you follow a lot of web comics, they'll advertise that either on itch.io or some other storefront they sell their paperback version of the comics, and sometimes this comes with exclusive covers or sketch dumps, really cool stuff like that. So a good way to find comics that you might like is to see actually if the web comics or artists who make the web comics you like are printing anything currently. Another really great way is if you follow them on social media, they'll often talk about that. Or sort of the second category I have is people who work in the comic book industry talk about other comic book artists and writers. And that's actually how I found kind of a big stack of these. And I've really enjoyed all of the recommendations I found through this way. So to the first one, so ones that started off as webcomics. You might recognize this one, although not necessarily in color, but this is Help Us Great Warrior. And this was super cute. I think it's just a one-off. I'll show you the back because I really love the back artwork. Like she's just there with the little sword. You can still, I think, find these. I remember seeing these, I think, on Tumblr. I can't really remember, but I think this is a one-off issue because there's no number printed here, and I haven't seen, when I've gone back a few times, any follow-up to this comic. So basically this little green friend right here is a warrior, and basically she's to save her village. It kind of gives the feeling of like Adventure Time kind of cuteness, so like when Finn has to save all the little villagers of cute people, sort of that kind of thing. So she's always questing to help her friends. And in this comic, a few more people are introduced. So those are the villagers, and then these two characters are introduced. So it's really cute. It's a one-off. I'd say you could read this in like an afternoon or an hour or however long. So this was really cute and fun. Another one that started off as a webcomic, which I'm sure many of you will recognize, is Hyperbole and a Half. And this was sort of a collection of comics by Ali Brush. I'm sure you've seen her before, like with her dog. Like she does so many comics that are autobiographical and things like that. So this is kind of just a big collection of those. So it's not necessarily like the other one is one continuous story or narrative. This one is just kind of a lot of short one-shots and funny stories and anecdotes from her life. And also some of it is a little more serious. Apparently the author has dealt with mental illness personally and sort of speaks about that at certain points in the book. And I think it's handled really well, especially as someone who also has suffered from depression and anxiety. It's really relatable and like almost funny in a sort of terrible way, if that makes sense. So this is another really fun one. And I went ahead and picked this one up at Barnes & Noble as well. So that's actually one of the older ones in my collection. The last one that I sort of found out because it used to be a web comic series is Super Mutant Magic Academy by Jillian Tamaki. I know she's also collaborated with, I believe it's her cousin, to write another book. And she also has another graphic novel called Skim. But this is really great. This is sort of in between those two first ones. So the first one is just kind of one overreaching story. The next is kind of a bunch of snippets. This falls somewhere in between that because the story does center around this main character here and her friend and sort of all the people who go to the school. And there is sort of an underreaching narrative that talks about what's going on in the school, but there also are one-offs like sort of salad days and things in high school. So it's sort of a mix of those two, which is nice. So it doesn't feel like it looks pretty thick, but it's actually really not that intimidating at all. So yeah, this one was another really fun one. Kind of has like those wistful, nostalgic feelings. So I really like this one. Sort of the second category, which kind of bleeds into the third, but what have you. I mentioned earlier that I have found a bunch of comics. Whoops, almost knocked mine over. Because of following comic book writers and artists. And I have to say, probably this stack is completely attributable to Kate Leth. She has done, she has her own website. I'm not sure if the webcomic is still up, but it's called Katie or Die or Kate or Die. I know she's done some writing projects. I know currently she's working on Hellcat, which I haven't been able to get my hands on yet. But I'm hoping to go to my local comic book shop instead of Barnes & Noble and then get my hands on that. But the first, which is pretty popular, although I would say, well, the other ones are pretty suitable for maybe a younger audience, this one is a little more serious and tackles some stuff like there's nudity, violence, that sort of thing. So I don't know that this would be maybe for a younger audience, but it's called Bitch Planet. It's really interesting, really good. This is kind of more on the serious side of comic books and really tells an interesting story and really is unlike anything I've ever read before. But this one's really great. It's kind of sci-fi dystopian future type of thing and focuses on things like all kinds of hierarchy, patriarchy, and has a pretty diverse cast of women as the main focus. So this was a really great one to read, and I know a lot of people have this NC or non-compliant tattoo now, including Laura Kate Dale, who's awesome, and if you haven't seen her work, you should check her out on YouTube. She does game reviews and a bunch of cool stuff. I love her. Another one that I found out due to Kate Leth was actually the new Batgirl series. This is actually super fun. I completely, like, I ate up this book in, like, I don't know how long, but it was great. And kind of didn't go the direction I expected. I had never really read Batman comics before and kind of considered them all to be, like, grim dark or whatever. But this has, like, a really nice balance of, like, personal struggle slash action sequences. And then it's just a fun story about, like, how a teenager would realistically deal with being a superhero. So this was really fun. The back cover art is really cool too. Oop, let me show that better. So it's kind of a new take on Batgirl, and I really, really enjoyed this one. And there's a few more in this series. I don't think I have them on me right now, but this was great. Another that I heard about due to Kate Leth was Black Widow. This is the Finely Woven Thread. This is absolutely awesome. I kind of got into this honestly because of the Avengers movie, the first one. I kind of became interested in the character of Natasha Romanoff. This gives like a neat insight and kind of shows how she's more complex than maybe you've been led to believe by the movies or anything, and lets you learn a little more about her background without being too obvious because she has a spy and everything. I'll show you the back cover, the cover art, and really all the art in this is fucking gorgeous. And I just found it really interesting. So I think this is definitely worth picking up. Well, then again, I think all of them are worth picking up. And finally, this one, which is unfortunate because I've seen that there is a second volume or book printed, but I haven't been able to find it. Again, I haven't been able to find a local comic book shop just yet, so I'm hoping that once I do, I can. But this is Lumberjanes. I absolutely loved this. It's super fun. The colors are great. The artwork is awesome. It's about a bunch of girls and people at camp, and it kind of has that like spooky mystery teen book kind of vibe without being like awful. Like it's just the right amount of cheese, and there's some fun stuff. The characters are really interesting. It features non-heterosexual characters, monsters. It's just, I don't know, it's really great. I would definitely pick it up, and it's about like friendship and stuff. So this is really cute and super fun. Whoop. Now the rest, I have a couple of them, so I'll just go ahead and show the covers and not really go into detail of the story of all of them, because that would kind of make this video way longer than it already is. But I did pick up Miss Marvel. I have really been loving this series. I actually didn't know too much about Captain Marvel or Miss Marvel before this. I had just, I think through the internet, heard about this comic coming out. So far, I really love it. Kamala Khan is excellent. The artwork is great. It kind of, again, touches on, similarly to Batgirl, the idea of struggling with growing up with a superhero identity, being a young woman in that sort of role. I also have the second book in the series, which is Generation Y. This one's pretty interesting, too, because it talks about sort of overreaching ideas of what our society or what millennials, kind of where we sit in this sort of current timeline and culture. Back artwork is beautiful. It also introduced the Inhuman timeline slash concept to me, which was really cool. And I know that there are some comics that simply focus on that, so I might go ahead and pick those up. And then the last one I have, which was really interesting from Miss Marvel, was Crushed. So again, the artwork is super great. Kamala Khan is excellent. Loki, as you can see here, makes an appearance, and really I can't recommend this enough. It's fun. There are definitely some talks about what it is like to be a person of color, specifically a Muslim person living within the US, and what it's like maybe not being born in the place that your parents are from, but still having very strong ties to that culture, and kind of what it means to be that sort of immigrant American or the child of immigrants. So I think that was really interesting. And even though I am not Muslim, I could kind of relate with a lot of the things because my mom immigrated to the United States. She was born in Tegucigalpa, Honduras. And I don't know, a lot of that stuff kind of hit home. And I think it's really worth reading and kind of gives a different perspective. Sort of what I like about all these comics is that it's not the idea that I had stereotypically given comics, that it's all like white dude with some stubble who his wife dies or something and he goes on an adventure. Like, it's not as stereotypical as that, and there's a lot of different voices and different people talking about kind of their story, and I find that really interesting. Another one that's kind of like that, which I absolutely love, and I think I also actually picked this up thanks to Kate Leff talking about it, but The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl. This comic is so great. I absolutely love it. The artwork is adorable. Oop, wrong way. The story is so fun. It features a lot of, as you can see, a lot of your favorite cast members from the Marvel Universe. It talks about Squirrel Girl, and what's really interesting about her, she doesn't always solve all of her problems through violence. Like, there's also thought work that goes behind it, and sometimes stories of just understanding and stuff. So I thought that was really interesting, that the whole premise isn't necessarily just, oh, I'm really strong, so I beat up all the bad guys or whatever. There's kind of more to it than that. So it's sort of a slice of life type of thing, and it's really funny. Like, there are great jokes in there, and let me see if I can find it because I have the second one here as well. And you can see, and I think want to cosplay her. But one thing that I found super cool, which I'm hoping you can see here, is that the authors put little, I don't think you can see that, little footnotes on the pages, and these are absolutely everywhere. And I think that's like such a nice touch that they really went through and put these. Some of them are jokes, some of them are just little facts about the characters, but I don't know, I just thought that was such a nice touch that they put like these little references and kind of talk to you directly. So that's really cool. Another one that I picked up, actually two of, is Thor, Goddess of Thunder. I've only read the first two thus far. I really freaking love it. It's very interesting. I'm not going to ruin who Thor is for you. You can see a frost giant there. But this is a great story. It starts off sort of as the mystery of who holds the hammer and who Thor is, but also talks about basically the political goings-on of Asgard and dealing with Odin the All-Father and then Freya the All-Mother. And so it's really interesting. Like, there's really a lot packed into it for kind of a shorter book series. Like, it's not thicker like some of the other ones I've shown. Another one that I absolutely love, super fun, again, maybe more for adult audiences, just because there's like nudity, sexual activity, swearing, drug use, all sorts of stuff. But absolutely awesome, is Rat Queens. And I actually have the first, and that I know of, only 3 volumes. So here's the first. We have the second, and then the third. As you notice, the artwork has changed from the second to the third. And unfortunately, I think that's the reason I'm not going to be picking up anymore. From what I understand or what I've heard, one of the artists was changed in favor of a young woman because they had previously had problems with one of the creators or one of the contributors to Rat Queen, because it was found out that he was an abusive person to his wife and in his own personal life. And so, quite smartly, this comic book series had not wanted to be associated with him, but they ended up bringing him back onto the project. So that just kind of put like a weird taste in my mouth that this guy's like, excuse my French, but basically a piece of shit, and they just let him continuously make a comic, which, if you can tell, is primarily about women and their stories and sort of avoiding some of that abuse. So it just felt like kind of icky. If you choose to purchase it, that's totally fine. I mean, it is really a great series. I've absolutely loved reading all of them. There's elements of mystery, the supernatural. I love fantasy books. I've read the Lord of the Rings series, The Hobbit, and plenty of others. So this kind of fits right into my wheelhouse of high fantasy and stuff. So that was really cool, but unfortunately, I don't think I'll be picking it up, like I said, because of that. This one I happened to actually just see, or these next two I actually just saw on the shelves of Barnes & Noble shelves, and they looked interesting enough. So this is Black Canary. Absolutely loved this. It's there has to be more than one because it is labeled one, but again, I haven't found a local comic book store, and every time I go in, I can't seem to find the following book in a series at Barnes & Noble, so I couldn't find the second one of this or the second one of Lumberjanes, and didn't want to do a special order. So we'll go ahead and see. But this was great. This kind of let me know about Black Canary's storyline. I didn't know too much other than her superpowers, but this was really interesting, and parts of her story, although maybe not this specific run and issue, do tie into the Batgirl series. So you get to see her again pop up there, and that's pretty interesting. So I do kind of have an affinity for this, and focuses actually on her music career and sort of things that were going on with that, because that is actually canonically part of her storyline. So I thought that was very cool. It kind of gave like Scott Pilgrim vibes to it, because again, it's like the musical theme and also people's personal lives. But if I'm going to be quite honest, I would say I would take this a million times over Scott Pilgrim. It's like if Scott Pilgrim was written like to the best of its ability, if that makes sense, and involved like superpowers and stuff. But this is absolutely excellent. I love it. I grew up watching Batman the Animated Series, so this next one I absolutely had to pick up. This is made in collaboration with the people, and you'll see by the art style, who originally drew and worked for that series. So it sort of very much fits into that style of how the characters are written and how they're drawn. So this is Batman, Harley, and Ivy, and so this is just like a special issue of just a bunch of their goings-on. Super cute, partners in crime. It's great. I really, really enjoyed it. There's so many like funny stories, sort of more serious ones. I have a soft place or soft spot in my heart for Harley and Ivy and their friendship or relationship, depending on which series you read and how that plays out. Related to that, I haven't actually read these next two, but these are the ones I picked up most recently. I picked up another Harley Quinn book. As you can see, the Joker and her on the cover. The artwork is gorgeous. I love it. Actually, it does share one of the artists, or at least writers, which is Paul Dini. Sorry, I don't know which one it is. And actually this, from what I remember reading a little bit of briefly in the bookstore, the Joker and Harley are not necessarily together in this entire series, which I always find interesting because I think Harleen Quinzel is a really interesting character and doesn't always need to be attached to the Joker, but her relationship with the Joker is very interesting because it's an abusive one and really a multi-layered one. So this explores that. Also, Poison Ivy pops up, so I had to pick it up. And lastly, I had actually seen this one before, and I had kind of made a note to myself to pick it up when I had a chance. This is Chew. Basically, it's kind of like, from what I remember, again, reading a little bit in the store, it's, oh, and I'll show you the back, kind of silly, but is kind of one of those like true crime type of things. Like, I guess, think True Detective, but perhaps not as serious. But the detective that you see on the front, basically his sort of power or advantage is that he can get psychic visions or things like that, or know things from eating them. So when he goes to the crime scene, he has to nibble on a bit of the body or whatever, and he can find out like who killed that person or what that person was doing. And I remember the first couple of pages being very funny. And a kind of quick side note about that, I do highly advocate maybe starting to read the first couple of pages or reading the back page to see what the comic is about, especially if you're like me and you're kind of particular about how certain characters are written or the kind of content that you like to see. That can give you a good idea if it's actually something that you want to see and purchase and read the whole thing, rather than you get all the way home, you have it, and you're like, this isn't for me. So yeah, that is my comic book collection. So far, I kind of have a problem. As you can see, there's like a huge stack right here. And I didn't expect this video to be this long, but c'est la vie. I suppose when you have this much stuff and this much to talk about, that just happens. But yeah, let me know if you've read any of these comics, or if you're interested in reading any of these comics. I can go into a little more depth about the stories. I kind of didn't want to give too much away in case you did actually want to read them, but I'd be happy to discuss any of them. So yeah. Just let me know, and I think that's all I have to say for today, so bye!